Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Wily APM Global User Community Webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. To withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you, Mr. Page. You may begin the conference.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the APM Wily Global User Community Webcast for today, March 22nd. This is the second session. There was a session earlier in the day, which I had the privilege to dial into, and it's actually looking forward to a very good session today. We have Tim Smith, who is the Principal Product Manager for the Wily APM product suite, and Zack Belcher, who is a Product Manager as well. I will be discussing today the unified end-user experience monitoring and looking at NetQoS SuperAgent and Multiport Collector CA Performance Center and how they interact with the current Intrascope Wily CEM and the triage map, and being able to hook all those things together to diagnose end-user experience problems. So I think we're in for a bit of a treat with that, and I think we will all enjoy seeing what you can get out of those products. So having introduced them, I will now hand it over to Tim and Zack to give us the presentation.
Hello, everyone. This is Tim Smith, and as the slide says, we will emphasize the marquee feature of APM 9.1, which is called Unified End User Experience Monitoring. I will make a few forward-leaning statements. To the best of our knowledge, what I tell you is accurate with regard to what's coming next in the product suite. But let's start with the big picture of CA APM. CA APM is a solution that pulls together information from different data sources and provides the different types of users, the inputs and the user interface that they need, the solution that they need for their individual roles. The Unified End User Experience Monitoring feature especially pulls together application data and infrastructure data and serves the purposes of the application triage engineer and those who wish to know the triage question. You know, if there is an application performance issue, is it possible that a network event could be responsible for the poor performance, or at least contributing to the poor performance? So we provide good triage information through this unified end user experience monitoring, and we'll learn how that's done and learn how to use the Multiport Collector, which is key to delivering that triage information. So prior to the APM 9.1 release, CA's APM solution emphasized the integration of CEM, end user experience monitoring, represented by the red dot on the left, with Intrascope, the red dot on the right, and from the passive monitoring of the packets coming from the server switch, CEM identifies business transactions and defects on those transactions and then links those to the back end. So that linkage from identification of business services, real-time monitoring of those services, and triggering transaction traces when there are defects, and being able to link the end user to the transaction trace to be able to tell on this defect, here's exactly what was happening in the application. Here are the calls that were made to the back end. This is the module of code that's not running as we would expect. All of that has been the integration that we call APM, and it's been available to you for the last couple of years. But we have expanded our definition of APM, and I'm going to emphasize a few of those points and then show you this end user experience monitoring as one of those expansions. So one big thing to change our visibility of applications is our integration with APM Cloud Monitor. You know, our Cloud Monitor solution consists of more than 60 monitoring stations around the globe that are capable of running synthetic transactions into your applications. And whether your applications are in the data center or hosted in the cloud, this solution provides visibility and it sends its data into APM. So there's integration with Cloud Monitor. That's one big change. We've delivered for the executive user the new Executive Insight product, which gives visibility on mobile devices and serves the purposes of managers and executives. And then the ITKO integration is the third big thing. ITKO is an acquisition that CA made recently, and it brings to us something called service virtualization, the ability to simulate business services. And when you have a simulation model of those services built with APM data and other data that is available to the ITKO solution, then you can do what-if analysis. What would happen if we changed to a new version of the application, or if something about the infrastructure changed? You can start to answer those issues. So it's a powerful analytics solution that helps to solve many problems and cover the full life cycle of your applications. But what we're going to talk about today is unified end-user experience monitoring, which takes the network and application data and brings it together in Enterprise Manager and gives you a workflow that links application errors to the related infrastructure data. So the big picture of how it all comes together is in this slide. Executives have their views through CA Catalyst for bringing together data from multiple sources, data from our own infrastructure tools, from third-party monitoring devices that you may have, and from our application performance management solution, all together in a unified services model, which is now made available to APM so that we can pull related infrastructure data down into the APM user interface, and then you see the ITKO integration there. So collectively, this is our solution. The unified end-user experience monitoring takes this APM 9.0 architecture, which has, again, been available since the 9.0 release more than 2 years ago, and it adds to it some new components. So first, this 9.0 architecture, this is the distributed architecture with the Enterprise Manager MOM on the left. There, on the top right, you see the agent collector, and on the bottom right, you see the TIM collector. So they're both gathering data and providing that up to the Enterprise Manager MOM. With 9.1, we add these components along the bottom. So working from right to left, the Multiport Collector becomes the new platform for integrating end-user experience. This is a platform that comes to us from NetQoS. It has it's been on the market now for 3 years, and its purpose is to gather data from SPAN or TAP. It has several monitor ports and a high-speed capture card, so it has a 10 gigabit solution, 2 ports of 10 gig that it can collect and process the TCP metrics. It comes also in a version 8 ports of 1 gigabit or 4 ports of 1 gigabit. So you choose the capture media that fits the volume of data and the right type of data you need to monitor, and it does its TCP analysis. Well, what's new is that the TIM, the Transaction Impact Monitor from APM, now runs on that platform. And with both the application layer processing of the TIM and the transport layer processing of the Multiport Collector, we're able to integrate the data. So when we see a defect identified by TIM, we're able to ask the Multiport Collector what was happening in the session where that defect occurred. So when that client was talking to that web server at the time of the defect, what is the story from the TCP metrics? And that reveals whether there were network issues or whether the issues were all on the server side, and you can characterize the problem very well this way. So we'll go into some detail on that. So that's the first piece of integration. The line you see from the Multiport Collector to the Enterprise Manager is allowing that TIM to operate like any other TIM. It does have more throughput than other TIMs because it's running on a powerful appliance. We're observing 3, 4, sometimes more, 3-4x amount of throughput as what a standalone TIM can do. So you see the standalone TIMs there in the middle on the right. if in your environment a standalone TIM is able to do X megabits per second of processing on your data, then you should expect that Multiport Collector to do 4X, 4 times as much processing under the same configuration and in the same data conditions. So it has more processing capabilities, but more importantly, it has the integration. When we see that layer 7 defect, we get the transport layer details that help to give you triage about whether the root cause is in the network and some characterization of that. Then you see in the middle the ADA SuperAgent Management Console. ADA stands for Application Delivery Analysis. ADA is the new name for SuperAgent because the job of SuperAgent is to analyze the delivery of application services over your network. So ADA is an option when you're running APM. Multiport Collector provides summarized TCP analysis statistics up to the ADA console, and that's information about networks, which, think of a network as a branch office of your corporation or, any group of IP address ranges, and also information about servers. So the ADA data includes details about all the servers that exist within server subnets that are monitored in your data center, and information about application ports, which ports are active on which servers. Well, the server data and the network data is now available to the Enterprise Manager MOM and can be stored in the Smart Store database. So a continuous flow of network and server data is represented by that line from the ADA Management Console up to Enterprise Manager MOM. And we'll take a look at how that's revealed in the investigator and what you can do with that data. And then the box on the left, the Performance Center server, that represents the CA Performance Center. Performance Center is a product that came from NetQoS. It's now been expanded to include more than just the original NetQoS products. eHealth data can be revealed in Performance Center, and now APM is a data source into Performance Center. In fact, with APM version 9.1, all APM customers are authorized a free copy of Performance Center. And they can then add APM as a data source into that Performance Center and view the data, and then from there link their APM data to the related infrastructure data. And we'll take a look at that in today's demo as well. So we're going to work from left to right as we introduce these 3 pieces of integration. Collectively, they make up the unified end user experience monitoring feature of APM 9.1. Okay. So let's start with the APM data as revealed in Performance Center. Here's a view of Performance Center that to an experienced network person, this looks like SuperAgent data. But this is actually APM data. The Performance Center queries APM, and APM sends up a list of the applications that are being monitored. Think of these as your APM front ends. And it also shows the status in terms of green, yellow, orange, red. And this is status as known to APM. All of this data is available in APM. We're just revealing it in a new way and providing workflow up in Performance Center. If you choose one of the applications on the left, and I've highlighted the physician application, this is a small QA system just to simulate the capabilities. You may have many more applications than just 2, but if you drill in on one of those applications, it takes you to the next view, the business services which support that application. This one only has 1. You'll typically have other business services as well. Their status is revealed over on the right so that you can see when performance was good or when it was compromised. There's full time navigation up top if you wish to look at the last hour, the last day, the last week, or any particular custom time frame. You do that with the time navigation, and APM will send up that data and reveal it here in Performance Center. The data is not stored in Performance Center. It's just queried and displayed based on what you're asking from the time navigation. If I drill in on that business service, it will show me the business transactions that support that service. Again, this is all APM data. It's available through the APM user interface. This is one more way to see the data. And if I drill down on a particular business transaction, I see the business transaction metrics. And if I scroll down, I see the real-time transaction metrics. Again, all this data is in APM. But now we'll do something interesting. If I go to that Incidents tab up there on the top right, I can find out for the transaction that I drilled down on, these are the incidents that were open during the time frame of this NTC page. So Performance Center is set to this time frame. APM is telling us that there were these 6 incidents that related to that login transaction. I'm going to drill down on that slow time incident, and when I do, I get the list of defects. These are individual defects related to that incident. And now I see some IP addresses. Okay, IP addresses. Well, we can work with that in the world of infrastructure data. So if you double-click on that web server IP address, it searches the Performance Center for everything it knows about that IP address. Well, that's a web server. Servers are known to Performance Center. No doubt we have some infrastructure monitoring of that server and related to that server. So Performance Center takes you to the server context page. This particular example shows eHealth data and SuperAgent data, ADA data. And we now understand more about application delivery from that server and some of the system monitoring stats of that server. There are additional tabs across the top to get more information about availability and such. So that's our link from this list that included details on individual defects, find out about the server, or find out about the client. If I double-click on a client, it's also a link, and it then searches the Performance Center for what it knows about that IP address. If that IP address is part of a site, because Performance Center has the concept of site, if a set of subnets are co-located in one place, you can put them in a site group and get reporting that's relative to that site. This screenshot shows a Singapore site and summarizes application delivery out to Singapore in this case. The red spike shows that there was a server-related problem on that first application. The orange dot above the red spike shows that, in this case, SuperAgent sent an alert saying server issue starting now. The blue and green that you see over on the right indicates a network-related problem. Blue is the retransmission delay metric. Green, elevated green, is the network round trip time. That's a clear indication of a network problem. Packets are being dropped between Singapore and the data center. You see 2 orange dots. In this case, NetVoyant and SuperAgent were both alerting to the fact that a router is dropping packets and response time is slow across the network. And then you can drill in further and get more details about where in the network is the problem, exactly what is the problem, and that suggests how to remedy the situation. So what we've just demonstrated was a workflow in Performance Center that took APM data, got it drilled down to a particular issue, and then linked it to the related infrastructure data so that you could better triage and understand what to do about a problem. Now, the second piece of integration is revealing the ADA data within APM. So there is a connector now from one. You can hook up one or more ADA management consoles. They will then stream their network and server data up to the Smart Store. And it will show up in the investigator tree as you see here. I'm highlighting the Islandia New York network over on the left, and I get 5 metrics. A status variable across the top, which will tell you normal behavior, degraded performance, excessively degraded performance, or an unavailable network. And then 4 metrics across the bottom: data transfer time, network round-trip time, retransmission delay, and server response time. These are 4 basic metrics well known to customers of the ADA product. They reveal the different components of delay so that you can tell if delay is on the network side or the server side of the collection point. And this data is, because it's here, we see the network data, and a little further down in the tree we see the same metrics for servers, similar metrics on a particular server-by-server basis. You can use this information in your custom dashboards in order to, for instance, show the server response times for the key servers that relate to the business service for which you have a dashboard, or to show network delivery for key networks that you know are important to a particular service. So it gives you more triage information for you to use within APM. Before I hand over for the purpose here of showing the demo, let me switch over to my desktop for just a minute and show what some more realistic data looks like. This is our application triage map, and Zach will give you a demo of this shortly. So let's look at this view. This is our performance center with a more realistic view of business transactions and their status. From here we can drill down further and get the time plots for the various metrics, and drill down to the list of incidents and defects, and then link over to the infrastructure data. So that's a more realistic view. And similarly, let me jump to my workstation. Well, I think I'll hold that one and allow Zach to take over now. We're going to show you a workflow and how you can actually use this to good effect to understand network-related issues and more about the incident that may be affecting the applications. Zach.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zack Belcher, and I'm the product manager for application delivery analysis, formerly known as SuperAgent. And bear with us just a moment as we're going to swap who's sharing their screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen now. What we're going to take a look at is exactly what Tim was just showing, but we'll be doing it on a live demonstration. So here we're inside of the APM UI, which I believe most of you are quite familiar with. So here we're inside of the triage map. What we're interested in is we have all of our components of the application being shown here, and I can see that these back-end components are all looking good. They've all got green indicators on them. What we really want to focus on for the sake of this demo, I do have a couple other lights I could investigate, but for the sake of this demo, what we're really interested in is the customer experience. Over on the left-hand side of the diagram here, we can see that for this particular transaction, which is the list order transaction, we have some poor transactions that are occurring, some slow response times that are occurring for users of that particular transaction. Now, just turned green on me as I'm talking about it. This is a live demo system, so bear with me as the data fluxes and flows. What we'll do is we're going to go and investigate that one. So I'm going to right-click on that transaction, and just to give you a little background on what we're looking at, this is a ticket exchange application where we're purchasing and buying tickets online. What I'm going to do is right-click, and I'm going to find incidents in CEM for this transaction, for the list order of those accounts. Guess I've timed out because I've been sitting here for quite a while. And so now I see the defects that have happened for this transaction. I've got two different types of defects. The one that is recent, in this case, the one that last occurred on March 22nd, which is a current one, would be this one, which is a slow transaction, a slow time defect. I'm going to go ahead and click on this ID to drill in and find out more information about this defect. And so inside of this incident, again, we're inside of the APM UI still, all the same things that you're used to seeing inside of here, details about this incident and some of the summary data about all the defects that make up this incident. And what I'll do here, though, to get to show where the integration occurs, is we're going to take a look at the list of individual defects that have occurred, and we can see there's quite a few of those defects. So here on the defect list, we can actually see each one that's occurred, the value of those, and what's interesting, what's relevant to the integration that we have is that we see the client IP address and the web server IP address. And so this, by clicking on these, we're going to be able to drill in and see the corresponding TCP session analysis data for that time frame. Okay, so this is going to carry me in context once I open up the defect. So let's take a look at this particular defect. I'll just grab the most recent one. And again, this is all the things you're used to seeing, but down at the bottom, through our integration, we have network health information. And so for the time frame and for the server and client involved in this slow transaction, we have the network round trip time, the server response time, and if these metrics are unfamiliar to you, we have a wealth of information available on the support site about what all these metrics mean. But what we'll do now is click on where it says TCP conversation analysis, and this is going to take us into the application delivery analysis Multiport Collector. So I'll click here. And again, I timed out because I've been sitting idle for a while here. And so I'm now drilled into the Multiport Collector in context. And what the Multiport Collector allows us to do is look at individual TCP sessions and see the response time of the server and of the network during that time frame and for that pair of hosts or for an individual conversation between that pair of hosts. So first of all, notice that I'm drilled in for the correct time frame. And in addition to that, it's carried down some filters. So let me highlight these over on the left-hand side. You see it says show filters. I'll just show you that it carried down the server and the client that I was looking at, and also the port of the application. This is an application running on port 8080. And I'm drilled into over on the left-hand side, this is kind of our navigation bar where we have the workflows. You'll see that it says I'm looking at TCP conversations for that pair of hosts. Okay? So I can see all of the conversations. And if I'm interested in a particular conversation, I'll look over on the right-hand side. Let's go ahead and sort these by, actually, you know what? I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to talk about time nav because this is my demo system, and it runs a certain defect every once in a while. And the last time that the incident that we have playing occurred, I know was this morning. So let's pull up that incident. I know it's got some nice data around it. So I'm going to change my time frame. You can see what I'm doing is I'm just clicking the time that I want from about 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And you're allowed to select up to a 3-hour time frame here. And so here's the issue I wanted to draw our attention to. Once we have something of interest on the graph, it's actually very easy to click and zoom. Okay? But I knew exactly the time frame I wanted to go for. That's why I set it manually. But let's go ahead and zoom in and see how easy that is. So click and drag and then a set. And this is the one I wanted to draw our attention to because it really nicely shows what the difference between an application, what the difference between a server issue and a network issue will look like inside of here. You can see the legend below the graph shows that green is NRTT, and that's the network round trip time. How long does it take for the packet, once it leaves the server, to go out to the client and then be acknowledged by that client and arrive back at the server? So how long does it take to do a round trip of the network? The blue is retransmission delay, and we're going to come back to that one in just a moment. Yellow is how long did it take to transfer all of the data for the request that the client made. And then the red is how long does it take the server to start fulfilling? How long did the server have to think about it before he started to answer the request that the client made? And so when we're looking up inside of CEM and inside of the APM solution, it's going to be really easy to tell is this an application issue. But a lot of times it comes down to, well, but is it a network issue? Or is it a server response issue? And this is where the ADA data becomes very powerful, is to be able to show you how much time was spent on the network, or is any packet loss occurring, which is delaying how long these transactions take. And when packet loss occurs, we see that reflected in this blue value, which is retransmission delay. Retransmissions are very, very bad for transferring data. TCP is a very skittish algorithm. It really backs off if there's any loss that occurs, and so you'll lose a lot of throughput anytime there is retransmission on your network. And that gets reflected in both the delay that's incurred by the retransmission itself, and also the lower throughput means it's going to take longer to transfer the data, which is why you see the yellow spiking up at the same time. So what I want to point out is if we're interested in a particular session, what I can do is let's sort by one of these columns. I'm going to see which one had the highest retransmission delay, for example. And so now I've clicked on retransmission as a column, so I'm only graphing retransmission delay right now. And if I right-click on a particular session, I can apply a filter so that I'm only looking at that session, and then I can export up at the top here, export that data into a packet capture. Okay? Now, maybe you don't want to look at a packet capture, but there are certainly going to be folks within your enterprise that may be useful for. You can hand that off to the infrastructure folks and say, look, here's your issue, here's the time frame, take a look at this UI and investigate, load up the packet capture yourself and investigate what's going on. And so you don't have to filter down. I just wanted to show that you can filter down that specifically. I can leave my filters very, very broad. What I'm going to do is I'll right-click now over on the Show Filters on the side here. And I'm going to remove my filters and just show that I don't have to be on a particular session. I can export to PCAP from anything that I'm looking at, and it'll give me the packets for that time frame. But you always want to be careful with how many packets we try and look at at once. We don't want to look at 3 hours worth of data across all applications in one packet capture. So with that being shown, let's back up a little bit. We just saw what you might do if you land inside of Multiport from a defect that occurred inside of CEM, or that was captured by CEM, I should say. So you land inside of Multiport, what might you want to do? Look at the sessions, which sessions are the worst. Something else you may want to do is start backing up this tree here. We're inside of the server tree, which means you would start your workflow from a particular server IP address, and you can see that if I go back up to the top, here's all the servers that we've seen, and I currently have one filter. So I'm already looking at port 8080. It still remembers my filter there because that's what we drilled in from. So here's all the servers on port 8080. So if I wanted to compare, is one server worse than another? Here's those two servers hosting that port, and I see that they're both very, very similar on transaction time. I don't see a big difference here. And since I'm clicked on server, I'm only looking at server response time right now. So if you're wondering, where did all that blue data go? Wasn't there a whole bunch of retransmission delay? We're clicked on server. We're only looking at the server performance right now. So this is what we'd expect to see. If it's a network issue, I would expect that all the servers are going to have similar transaction times, and we do see that. Look at the overall transaction time in this column. We'll go back to here. Here's where our stack is again. I see that we have very similar response time across all servers. Okay. If I wanted to compare different clients, unfortunately I only have one client here. Let me back out and pick a different application. So there's different workflows you can start from. I could go back up to the application tree and say, show me a list of all of the ports that I'm seeing. Right, inside of ADA, an application is really a TCP port number within this UI. So show me all the TCP ports that I'm seeing, and then I can look inside of those. So I'll pick a different one. I'm not sure. Let's see which one has a decent amount of data here. Let's go inside of, we'll try Zen Desktop. I'm not sure what this one has in it. Only one server. We see find one that has a couple more. Try my port 81. Okay, I got a couple servers on this one. So once I'm drilled into here, I could say, oh, look at this server's got higher transaction time. Let me look at that particular server. I only got one client. Ends up happening on demo data. I was hoping I could show you. Very easy to compare different clients on the same server as well, assuming you have multiple. When you're looking at this in your real environment, you're going to see hundreds and thousands of servers and clients showing up. But very easy to compare between those once you've drilled in. And you can see where you're going to drill down into. So basically these different categories over on the left-hand side are, what do you want to start from? Do you want a list of all the applications? Do you want a list of all the servers? Do you want a list of all the clients? You could do this by subnet for entire locations, maybe a site. Or if you're not sure if it's the client or the server, here's just a list of all the IP addresses that we're seeing. Okay? And this one's going to do it by traffic initially. I can drill into that. Pick an IP address. Looks like that one's not a server. Don't have that. Picking on bad ones here. Okay, I can at least see traffic on that one. But you could go by just IP address. You can look at all the protocols that we've seen. Inside of Multiport, we're able to see TCP data and UDP data. Unlike inside of the ADA console where you'll only see TCP information. So the Multiport really gives you a lot of additional analysis that you're able to do, or it's analysis that you're able to hand off to other folks within your organization if they're more familiar with looking at the network or the infrastructure side of things. There's a lot of flexibility to do really advanced troubleshooting. Now, if we kind of go back into our troubleshooting mode, what I showed you a little while ago was that we were having an issue. Let's see, let's drill back into our issue here. We had, let's go to that application. Let's go back into ticks. Actually, here's our time frame. So what we were seeing was we had an issue, and actually I'm clicked on network. You can see that it's Islandia that's having the issue. Okay, it's Islandia has the highest transaction time. So how do we actually resolve this? At this point, ADA has told us, well, CEM told us, hey, there's slow transactions occurring. ADA has told us it looks like it's a network issue and it's due to retransmission delays occurring. Okay, but why is retransmission delay occurring? How do we answer that question? Well, that's where we want to leverage the entire service assurance solution. If we head back into Interscope here, back into APM UI, there's a link down the bottom left that says network status. If we click on that link, it's going to bring up the integration that Tim was talking about a moment ago, where we can see the ADA data inside of APM, and there's also a link from here into the Performance Center, which Tim was talking about as well. And in the Performance Center, if you recall, that is just a reporting UI where we bring together data from all of the solutions. So we've got SNMP data from eHealth and NetVoyant. We've got NetFlow data from Reporter Analyzer. We've got the data from ADA. We've got the data from the APM solution as well. So inside of here, I'm just going to type in Islandia up on my search bar on the top right, because I know that's where I was seeing an issue. I've got a site group for Islandia. I've got a subnet in Islandia. And here's what I'm really interested in. I already know that we've got slow performance for that network, and I suspect that it's retransmission delay causing that. I want to know what is causing those drop packets. So I'm going to click on the interface in Islandia and see what's going on at that site, see what's going on at that interface. Now, if you recall, I had to jump back a little bit in time because it happened this morning. That's when the issue was kicked off on our demo system here. So I'm going to select the time frame of last 8 hours to bring me back so I can see that time frame. And if we scroll down, here's the interface utilization. It's a little smoothed out since I have such a large time frame selected. But there's my interface utilization from SNMP. And what I'm really interested in is what was happening at about 8:30 to 9 o'clock this morning. That was when that issue occurred down on the multiport. And we see a big spike in traffic on the outbound side of that interface. Well, what is that spike in traffic? It looks like that's HTTP data. And if I click on that link, I'm going to be drilled into our protocol analyzer, which is called Reporter Analyzer. And I can see who are the hosts, who's talking on port 80. It looks like people are browsing to YouTube. And not only that, I can see who's talking to YouTube. So I'm able to quickly determine, and when you see a spike in traffic like that, your initial question is, should it be there or not? I see people talking and taking up bandwidth. Is that because it's a critical application and I need to be able to support that? Do we need to upgrade the link? Or is it stuff that shouldn't be there? Is someone messing around during the day and we need to either police that or put in some QoS or rules inside of a proxy to block that kind of information from being transferred? And in this case, we're able to confirm, no, we don't need to buy an expensive upgrade. People browsing things on the internet is impacting our performance. So hopefully inside of this demo, you've gotten to see how we can go from defects on a transaction level all the way into figuring out, is that a network, is that a server issue, and then if it is a network issue, why is it a network issue? And across that, we've really shown you how we can tie application performance to the infrastructure that's supporting it across all of this service assurance portfolio.
So at this point, we'd like to open up to questions and use the remaining time for Q&A.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Again, that's star 1. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Your first question comes from John Gregg with Wells Fargo.
Hi, I'd just like to know the effect of SSL between the client machine and web servers on some of this data gathering.
Okay, well, the Multiport Collector is running a version of the TIM, and if it's SSL traffic, not a problem. You know, just like any other TIM can decode the SSL and find the business transactions and measure them, that's true also with the TIM that sits on Multiport Collector. You also have the option of putting an encipher card on the Multiport Collector in order to manage the keys and do the decryption. So yes, SSL is fully supported in the solution that involves Multiport Collector. Was that your question?
Hopefully.
Okay, good.
Well, looks like we have one question on the Q&A, or two questions coming in on the Q&A on live meeting. A common question: will the presentation be used early in broadcast, be available for download or distributed by email to participants? Yes, this presentation will be available. I believe this exact one's being recorded right now. We recorded the one this morning, and we also have just a kind of a more self-contained version of this. I recorded a video last week on this exact demo scenario, and that's going to be posted on the support site. But I believe everyone who attended is going to be receiving a link to the video recording as well.
Yes, so expect an email that shows you how to get these recordings. This session, this webinar itself, and a special video that goes into more detail. If you'd like to watch it again or share it with your coworkers, you know, it's really about making the link from application to infrastructure and then using the Multiport Collector to harness all that TCP analysis in order to better understand the problem. Okay. And the second question?
Oh, it looks like the other one just came in blank.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
If you would like to ask audio question, please press *1.
You also have the option of using inside of live meeting. There's a little Q&A button up towards the top. If you don't feel like chiming in over the phone, you're welcome to just type out a question.
You do have an audio question from the line of Steve Oak with WellPoint.
Hi. In all the things I've seen, I see your collectors having TIMs and agents. Can they be mixed? Or do you always have a collector for TIMs and a collector for agents, you know, separated?
It is possible to use a single enterprise manager that is listening to both TIMs and agents, yes. For larger enterprises that have large APM deployments, it is typical to separate them out and have a TIM collector separate from an agent collector in a distributed environment. But everything we've shown does work on a single enterprise manager, the standalone solution rather than the distributed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
At this time, there are no further audio questions.
Okay. Given a couple questions on the live meeting. Jeff has asked, is there training available? There is training available. We have classes that are available on the learning portal on each of the products. I'm not sure training for exactly what you're asking. This is the only thing we have on the newest integration, really what we've covered right here. If you're looking for more training on ADA, there's great resources on the support portal, and there's great resources on the education portal as well. I think we're going through a revision of updating all those to put those on the latest releases. So I'm not sure exactly what training you're looking for, Jeff, but I believe we should be able to help you get that.
So the products each have a product page on CA Support Online, and that product page has quite a few videos and documents that help you to understand how to use this and about ADA in general and Multiport Collector in general. And the APM 9.1 release. There's in the documentation for APM 9.1, there is an integration guide that very well describes how to set up this integration and how to use it. So yes, there's extensive documentation and training available. Next.
Oh, Jeff updated his. It was on using CEM after it's up and running. Yep. Everything Tim said applies, yes.
Okay. Is it possible to get the line of code causing a defect? So transaction traces run when there are defects, and They help isolate the module of code. As far as the exact line of code, that's a lower level of detail than you normally will get. So are there any other questions?
For audio questions, please press *1.
Next question is, will the Multiport Collector still track client IPs if they are NATed or if there are firewalls? The Multiport Collector is going to see wherever it's positioned, right? So if you take a span from behind the firewall, it's going to see whatever the IPs are behind the firewall. If you take the span from in front of it, it'll see what's in front of the firewall. We actually would expect that you'll probably end up doing both of those a lot of times, because the Multiport Collector has, as the name would indicate, or I should say Multiport Monitor to make it make a little bit more sense in terms of typical APM deployment. These would do the monitor functionality of a standard APM deployment. The Multiport Monitor, as the name indicates, has multiple interfaces on it that you can span or tap into. So typically we would expect that you'd probably be in front of the firewall in some cases and behind it in other cases, so that you can get visibility on both sides.
Okay, so how would you, let's say that I have a 4-port Multiport Collector and I'm running a version of the TIM, and let's say I have 500 megs worth of HTTP data. How would I organize my Multiport Collector in order to be able to run the TIM and still see the back-end traffic?
Right, so the way that the integration works is you've got you choose one logical port for the TIM to run on. And a logical port could be one interface, or it could be multiple interfaces. So basically a grouping of interfaces. And that's in case you have a scenario where to get all of your HTTP data into TIM, you need to be spanning from multiple places. And so in that scenario, you might make 2 physical interfaces into a logical port. You'd then assign it so that that logical port runs TIM. And so it will process anything that it sees. Now, in the meantime, the ADA processing is happening across all ports, regardless of whether or not you've enabled the TIM processing on those logical ports. And the reason for that is we always want to be processing ADA metrics so that we can line them up. Right? So that anything that the TIM processes, ADA also processes, and we have data to be able to drill down from one into the other, and those are always lining up together.
So what would the other 3 ports on my 4-port box? Let's say that all my HTTP fits on one port, and let's say I've arranged it so that perhaps I have an Anui or Gigamon filtering device out front, and it's listening to several switches, and it's filtering the data I want, and all the good HTTP data is coming to port number 1, and that's where TIM is running. What do you do with ports 2, 3, 4?
That's where you're going to be looking at the back-end transaction, right? Because typically CEM sits at the front-end web server, and it's going to be sitting, on an internet-facing, area most likely, right, in the DMZ. Whereas a lot of times those database servers and back-ends are sitting, they're firewalled off, as the question kind of indicated. So those other 3 ports, what we typically would be the other 3 ports, are going to be used to see all that server-to-server communication, so that we see all those servers talking to each other, and when it makes a database call, what's the response time on that database call? When it makes a lookup for some authentication, we see every port across all those back-end servers.
So is Multiport collecting only where APM is collecting?
Nope, it's collecting wherever you position it. And you can position it very broadly with all those interfaces available to you, up to 8 individual 1 gig ports or dual 10 gig.
It's fairly typical to define server subnets that show where you wish to do all of your server-to-server collection. So ADA, the Multiport Collector in this case, will find all of the servers that exist within your server subnets. Let's say it's a couple of different /24 networks. And all that server traffic will be analyzed by Multiport Collector and saved in this session-level performance database. So that you'll be able to see the N-tier architecture of your application, the web tier talking to the app tier talking to the database, and so forth. All of that at the transport layer, your TCP metrics is all saved in Multiport Collector, and it can be quite a bit more than what you're monitoring with CEM or with Intrascope.
Okay. Looks like we have a CEM question. I'm going to defer to Tim if you know that one.
With 9.1, is it possible to have a user in 2 or more user groups in CEM? And I believe the answer is no. Next question, please.
And we do have an audio question from the line of Dale Larson with Western Mutual.
Oh, okay. Question for you guys. How does the correlation of all the different metrics from the different parts of the CA's suite there, from Intrascope, from CEM, and NetQoS, how does that affect the performance, and what are the upper limits of the metrics that can be collected?
It's true that if you're using the connector from the ADA management console up to the MOM, and then you have network and server data getting stored in SmartStore, and that does produce quite a few metrics, right? So we give you the option to turn that on or turn that off. If you find that there's value in having that network and server data, then you may choose to keep that in your SmartStore, and you may need to size your SmartStore appropriately to hold all of that. It's also possible to collect only the status variables. So the normal, degraded, excessive, unavailable status, you can choose to save only that variable for each server, for each network. That will take up a lot less space. So we give you the option, but yes, you do need to consider whether you have room to store all this metric data, based on whether you find it useful to have that in your dashboards and to provide the additional triage that's possible with that network data.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
And we have a follow-up question from the line of Steve Oak.
Hi, this is Steve again. One thing on the CEM, multiple groups. If you're using EEM, you can have multiple groups because you're defining them within EEM as the security mechanism. So you can't under the normal, but under EEM you can. My question was, when you say you're storing the data in the SmartStore, if you have again, a MOM and collector, would you set up a collector for the ADA data to go into, since the MOM doesn't store anything in the SmartStore?
So wherever you have your TIM collector, the TIMs on Multiport Collector are they're just another TIM. Administratively, they look like another TIM, so right. They would go into wherever you're doing your TIM collector, and that's for the APM data. So all the normal data that a TIM sends up to his collector, that's going to happen. There's more of it, right? Probably 4 times as much of it coming off of a Multiport Collector TIM. But then there's also that stream of data from ADA Management Console up to SmartStore, which takes another channel.
Okay, but which SmartStore are you going to is the question.
The MOM SmartStore.
In the actual MOM SmartStore? Okay.
Yes.
Since typically you don't store any data in the MOM SmartStore.
Okay, so let me defer that question and put the answer in the email that goes out to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Looks like there's a follow-up question to the previous ones from Ellen.
Okay, so Ellen is saying if you get module level detail and there's a defect, is there anything to help you get to the method or parameters passed in with the user transaction? Okay, so this is a regular CEM question, right? If you get to the module level detail and there is a defect, can you get to the method? So can we, this is regular CEM functionality. Would someone else like to take that one? We're more the network team here on the line rather than the CEM team.
Yeah, we both have more of a.
So we'll have to defer that question.
Focus. Don't want to give you an unsure answer.
So have to get back on that one. In an environment with more than one APM cluster servicing different applications that share the same back-end infrastructure and network, does this type of configuration require multiple multiports? Or does a single multiport support multiple TIMs? There's one TIM per multiport collector. Okay.
Yeah. But that TIM can support far more. So if you can, assuming you can aggregate so that all of those what would be separate applications could go into or could fit into one multiport, you should be able to monitor all of that together. It would make more sense. Basically, you just want to change the way that you would architect it. I think you would want to try and architect it so that, well, because of the back end. It'd be okay if the back ends were monitored separately from the front ends, right?
So multiple APM clusters.
Yeah.
Is the key to that. And they share a database, let's say, and they share a network.
But the database is on a different multiport. That's not going to cause a problem. If you monitor, right?
So
just different tier.
If you're spanning the similar data to more than one multiport, it's recorded in each multiport and it's not a problem. So if those multiports each have their TIM and they're both reporting into different clusters, then you'd have the drill down on the one and you'd have the drill down on the other, provided that span data that you need is in fact replicated and it's going to both multiports.
So I would say you don't even have to do it necessarily. I mean, you've got flexibility on this one, John. I think what matters is that you provision the multiports so that you have an appropriate amount of TIM traffic going to each one. That you, like we said, about 4 times what you probably have now with a standard or standalone TIM. But at that point, if the back-end database or other tiers are being monitored only on a particular multiport and not the same one that the front end is being monitored on, that just means you'd open up a different multiport to look at the back ends. Those multiports can still all go up to the same ADA management console because basically what we're getting at is the drill down from CEM into multiport is only going to be for the front end. That's the only thing that has to be there. It's a requirement. It's a nice bonus if the back end's also there and you could switch your filter on the fly once you arrive in multiport. But it's not necessary. You don't have to do it that way. Is that your understanding too, Tim? Am I on the right path there? Or you could span it to all of it. You could do a redundant span architecture where you use a data aggregator or a span aggregator to send the span of those back end tiers into all the multiports, and they'll all have it. They'll all keep it. They record whatever they see. So you're flexible on that one.
So you could put the back end into one multiport. You could duplicate the traffic and have that data on more than one multiport.
Yeah.
And it just affects what your workflow is. You'll definitely see the front end traffic because where the TIM is running, those packets are analyzed at the transport layer also. So you will have the drill down and you will know about application delivery from the end user into the data center. But to understand the tier-to-tier traffic, it's up to you whether you span the back end to one or more multiports so that it's always there, if you have common back-end infrastructure.
Yeah. I think it's just a specific enough answer that we really want to look at your architecture before we recommended one over the other.
I think it's rather uncommon to send the same data to more than one multiport.
Yeah. Okay. We could work with you to help you figure that out. Give us a call.
So we're running a little over. Let's take one more question and then
that'll be the last one.
Wrap up.
We currently have 9.1. What else is needed to add in multiport? Great question.
So multiport collector is always an option, right? If you wish to run TIM on the standalone TIMs and if you wish to use ADA with its software-based collector, you can do this. You'll still have network and server data in your ADA management console that can still be streamed up to SmartStore. You can still run Performance Center in order to view your APM data. Multiport's always an option. If you wish to put it in there, and if you choose to put a TIM on there, then you have the higher performing TIM, and you get the drill down to the network data.
So if you're saying it's 9.1, so I assume it means ADA 9.1, right?
So if you have ADA 9.1,
literally what you need is you need to buy a Multiport. Talk a little bit about. Did we talk a little bit about what Multiport has? It's a very high performance server. Lots of memory, lots of CPUs, a dedicated capture card. So you'll need to purchase one of those appliances, and then it plugs right into your existing ADA console. You probably want to just double check that the specs on your console can keep up with having a big collection device feeding into it, but most of our customers are on good enough hardware to do that.
Multiport Collector is also a packet capture appliance. It has 16 terabytes of storage, 11 terabytes of packet storage, and the rest is for the performance database, the session level details.
That's how we were seeing before we saw that option to export to PCAP is there's a first in, first out buffer where we're writing all the packets that we see to disk. So it's a big appliance with a lot of functionality. It's got that 1-minute database. It's got a rolling packet capture buffer of 11 terabytes, as Tim just mentioned, and it's specially designed to be able to handle all of this while calculating the TIM metrics as well.
So back to the question, if you already have 9.1, what do you need? You need to purchase a Multiport Collector. Then you have the option to run the TIM on there. It's not required. You can use it just for the transport layer metrics.
And it's included. You don't have to buy that separate. We're not charging you once for Multiport and once for TIM.
That's true. Every Multiport Collector now comes with TIM software, and you just add that TIM to your cluster, and you're ready to go.
What's it about including stuff? Get your NPC for free, get your TIM for free with your Multiport. We want you to use this.
Oh. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the webinar, and remember there are additional materials available on the product pages, and we'll be sending out an email with more details about where to find the recordings and those additional resources.
You'll be seeing a survey pop up. Your feedback is appreciated. First part is, of course, to take a look at what should we cover next time we do one of these, and after that, I think you'll see an evaluation for how this presentation went. We appreciate your feedback. We hope this was helpful, and thank you very much for coming.
Okay. Back to you, Warren.
Thanks, guys. Thanks again for the presentation and spending your time giving us all that information. Just wanted to say thanks for everyone for attending on behalf of the global user community. For those who are still on the call, we have had several people who have expressed interest in helping us out with the global user community, and we'll be meeting soon to talk with them about how they can help us. Anyone else who is interested in being a part of the global user community, we have the website and a forum that you can go to